You wake up each morning with the faint hum of the world pressing against your chest, not heavy enough to crush you, but just enough to remind you that you are not free. You scroll, sip, rush, smile, and speak. The motions of living have become rehearsed lines in a play you didn't audition for, and yet, deep down, there is a voice, soft but stubborn, whispering that something isn't quite right. You feel it when you stare at the ceiling before sleep. When the silence between songs lingers too long, when you smile in a photo but your eyes tell another story. You're not lazy, though they told you that. You're not broken, though you've felt that way. You're simply caught between the person you are and the one you've quietly dreamed of becoming. The tragedy isn't that you're failing, it's that you've started to believe that you can't succeed. Somewhere along the way, you learned to shrink, to doubt the fire that once burned so effortlessly. Maybe someone's words did it. Maybe time itself wore you down. But the truth is, you were never meant to live in the shadows of your own potential. The system you live in, the rules, the routines, the quiet pressures, they are designed to make you forget what you're capable of. And so you confuse stillness with weakness, uncertainty with failure, fear with proof. But what if the problem isn't that you're lost, but that you've been looking in the wrong direction? What if you've been trying to win a game that was never meant to be played this way? There's a secret hidden in plain sight, one that changes everything. When you finally see it, you walk through the world believing you're awake, but most of the time, you're not. The alarm rings, you rise, you scroll. 1,000 little motions stitched together into a pattern you call living. But it's not really life, is it? It's repetition dressed as purpose. You go to work, nod at the same faces, laugh at the same small jokes, repeat the same answers when someone asks, "How are you?" You say, "I'm fine," but you're not fine. You've just learned to perform the role that keeps the world running smoothly. The illusion of being okay is the oil that keeps the machine turning. Society doesn't reward awareness, it rewards compliance. And so, most people live like actors who have forgotten they're in a play. They chase money, status, validation, all while quietly suffocating under the weight of what they should be. You see it in their eyes, that dim flicker of something real, something wild and alive, buried beneath years of being realistic. The illusion is everywhere. It's in the forced smiles at family dinners, where silence hides the truths no one dares to speak. It's in the endless scrolling through lives that look happier than yours. It's in the meetings where everyone agrees, but no one believes. You begin to notice the subtle choreography, the way people fill their days to avoid themselves, work, noise, distraction, a constant hum of movement so they never have to sit in silence long enough to feel the ache beneath the surface. The irony is cruel. The world teaches you to chase everything outside of you, while the very thing you've been seeking quietly waits inside. The illusion tells you that success is something you earn, that worth is something you prove, that happiness is something you find. But what if none of that were true? What if the real tragedy isn't that people are lost, but that they've forgotten their dreaming? You begin to see it, the unconscious dance, the quiet desperation hiding behind smiles, the invisible cages made of fear and expectation. Everyone pretending, everyone afraid to admit they're pretending. And maybe, so are you? But awareness, once it starts, cannot be undone. You start noticing too much, feeling too deeply. The curtain of illusion begins to tremble. And in that trembling, something ancient inside you begins to wake. It begins quietly, like a crack in glass, small, delicate, almost invisible. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. The world that once felt solid begins to shimmer, revealing the fragile scaffolding beneath. You start noticing the pauses between people's words. The way someone's smile fades a second too early, the hollow echo in conversations that used to feel real. You begin to see, and seeing is both beautiful and unbearable. The illusion collapses like a fog lifting at dawn, slow, graceful, yet terrifying. You realize that most of what you believed was truth was only habit, that your dreams were often borrowed, and your fears were inherited. It's disorienting, like waking from a long sleep only to realize you don't recognize the room you're in. There's an ache that comes with awareness, a soft mourning for the comfort of ignorance. You begin to understand why people cling to their illusions. They're warm, familiar, and predictable. Reality, on the other hand, is raw and untamed. You feel both liberated and lost, as though someone handed you your freedom and then quietly whispered, "Good luck." You start to feel everything more intensely. The color of the sky seems deeper, conversations feel heavier, silence becomes louder. You sense how fragile everything truly is, how fleeting moments are, how temporary people become. But within that fragility lies a strange beauty. You see the sacredness in small things. A stranger's laughter, the stillness of morning light, the sound of your own breath. You begin to understand that awareness isn't a destination, it's a threshold. And crossing it means leaving behind the person you were, with no guarantee of who you'll become. But awakening isn't about becoming better. It's about becoming real. It's peeling away everything false until all that remains is truth, raw, imperfect, unpolished. It's terrifying, yes, but there's no going back. Once your eyes open, pretending to be asleep feels impossible. You sense something stirring in you, a deep, wordless knowing that your life was never meant to be a performance. You have woken up in a world still fast asleep. Awakening is not a celebration. It's a quiet storm that tears through everything you thought you understood. When you begin to see the world for what it truly is, you also begin to see how few people are willing to look with you. At first, you try to share your insights, the subtle truths you've discovered about existence, about illusion, about the deep machinery of human pain. But most people just smile politely, change the subject, or gently suggest that you're overthinking. You start to realize that awareness is a kind of exile. You can stand in a room full of people and feel utterly alone, not because you're unseen, but because you're too seen by yourself. The conversations that once filled you now feel like echoes. The laughter that used to comfort you now rings hollow. The noise of the world becomes unbearable, too bright, too fast, too loud. You start craving silence, solitude, stillness. But solitude, though peaceful, can also be brutal. There's a story, not of any famous person, just an ordinary one. A woman who began to wake up. She noticed the way her colleagues spoke more about appearance than purpose. The way her friends filled silence with endless talk. The way even love seemed like an agreement between two lonely people, pretending to be whole. She saw all of it, and it broke her. Not because she hated the world, but because she could no longer lie to it. One day, she stopped trying to fit in. She walked away from a conversation mid-sentence, left her job, sat alone in her apartment, staring at the ceiling for hours, wondering if she'd gone mad, but she hadn't. She was simply feeling what everyone else avoided. Truth, in its purest form, is isolating. You, too, might find yourself drifting away from old friends, old places, old patterns. You start saying less, listening more, but hearing everything. You become sensitive to energy, to dishonesty, to noise, to false enthusiasm. You no longer crave belonging the way you once did, and yet, you ache for connection, not the surface-level kind, but the kind that feels like being seen by another soul who also remembers. The paradox is cruel. Awareness brings clarity, but clarity brings loneliness. You start to wonder, is this the price of seeing clearly? You begin to understand why some people choose ignorance. It's softer. It's easier. But even in your solitude, something inside you whispers, this is necessary. Because isolation is not punishment, it's preparation. It's the cocoon before transformation. And so you sit in the silence, uncomfortable but awake, alone but alive, knowing that once you walk through this darkness, there is something on the other side, something waiting to be born from the quiet. For the first time, you realize that loneliness is not emptiness, it's space being cleared for truth to enter. The longer you stay awake, the heavier it becomes. Awareness demands responsibility, and that's where the conflict begins. You start to see moments when you could speak up, intervene, or try to wake others, but something stops you. Stand in silence, watching people repeat the same patterns you've already seen through. You want to tell them, you don't have to live this way. You want to shake them awake. But then you remember how it felt when someone tried to do the same for you. How defensive you became. How tightly you clung to your illusions. You realize that truth can't be forced on anyone. It has to be discovered. And so you stand at a crossroads. Do you protect your peace and stay silent, or do you risk everything to speak? There's a quiet moral war inside you. You see injustice, hypocrisy, falseness, not just in others, but in yourself. You catch yourself pretending again, minimizing truth to make others comfortable. You smile when you don't feel like smiling. You say it's okay when it's not. Each small act of self-betrayal cuts a little deeper now, because you're aware of it. You begin to notice how truth isolates, but silence corrodes. You can't return to blindness, but you also can't live entirely in confrontation. And so, the battle shifts inward. The real conflict isn't between you and the world, it's between who you are and who you still pretend to be. You feel torn between compassion and truth, between understanding and honesty. You don't want to hurt anyone, but you also don't want to keep lying. It's exhausting to see everything, to feel everything, and to know that not everyone wants to see. You try to speak softly, but even your softness sounds like rebellion to those who are still asleep, so you learn restraint, not silence, but sacred timing. You learn that wisdom isn't shouting truth into deaf ears, but planting quiet seeds in open hearts. You learn that real change isn't born from argument, but from embodiment, from being the living proof that awakening doesn't destroy. It transforms. And yet, the weight of awareness continues to press against your chest. The question lingers, like smoke. How long can I hold all of this without breaking? It happens slowly at first. The fatigue creeps in like fog, soft and quiet. You start to feel the weight of everything you've seen, the illusions, the masks, the endless pretending. Awareness, once exhilarating, now feels heavy, almost unbearable. You can't unsee what you've seen, can't unknow what you've learned. The world keeps spinning, loud and relentless, but you move through it like a ghost. You smile less, speak less, and every interaction feels like walking through smoke, present, but fading. You feel the pull between two worlds, one that wants you to return to sleep, and one that demands you stay awake. The mind becomes a battlefield. Thoughts echo, loop, spiral. You start questioning everything, your purpose, your worth, even your sanity. You wonder if you've gone too far, if seeing so much has broken something inside you. Nights become long, restless. Days blur together. The silence that once brought peace now feels suffocating. You long for simplicity again, for the comfort of not knowing, of not feeling everything all at once, and then you begin to collapse, not in the dramatic way of stories, but in the quiet unraveling of a soul stretched to thin. You stop pretending to be strong. You stop trying to understand. You let yourself fall apart. There's a strange mercy in it, the surrender. You realize you don't have to carry the entire truth, the entire world, on your shoulders. You were never meant to. Awareness was never about control, it was about release. You start to see that collapse is not failure. It's transformation in disguise. Like a forest fire that burns away what no longer serves, your collapse clears space for something new. Tears come without warning. Laughter, too strange, hollow, but honest. You begin to understand that even breaking has its beauty. Because in that breaking, all that is false finally falls away. You no longer need to be perfect, or wise, or endlessly aware. You only need to be human, and in the ashes of your exhaustion, a soft truth begins to whisper. You were never meant to save the world, only to see it clearly, and love it anyway. And then, something shifts. Not with noise or thunder, but with stillness. The kind of stillness that feels like standing in the middle of a storm and realizing the wind no longer touches you. After the collapse, there's quiet, deep, clean, sacred. It's as if life, after watching you struggle and fall apart, finally takes your hand and whispers, "Now, you understand." You stop chasing answers, you stop demanding meaning from everything. You begin to realize that the world doesn't need to be fixed, it needs to be seen. You see that awareness was never meant to separate you from life, but to reunite you with it. Every heartbreak, every failure, every loss, they weren't punishments, they were invitations. Invitations to come home to yourself. You start noticing beauty again, not the loud kind, but the quiet kind. The way sunlight lands on a table, the way rain hums against glass, the way your breath feels like an ocean moving through you. Life hasn't changed, you have. You begin to understand that peace isn't found by escaping chaos, but by embracing it without resistance. You no longer fight the noise of the world, you let it pass through you. You no longer carry the pain of others like a burden. You witness it with compassion, knowing it's not yours to heal. There's a freedom in that. The freedom of not needing to control anything anymore. You start forgiving yourself, others, the world. Forgiving not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. You realize that people aren't asleep out of choice. They're asleep out of fear. Just as you once were. And suddenly, you stop judging. You start loving differently. Not as possession or protection, but as presence. You see that love, at its core, is simply awareness without resistance, and then comes the quiet revelation. You were never failing. You were just learning how to believe again. You see that success isn't a goal, it's a way of seeing. It's not about achieving, it's about allowing life to move through you without constant interference. You understand that faith isn't about certainty, it's about surrender, trusting the process even when you can't see the path. You begin to live again, but differently. Softer, slower, truer. You laugh more easily. You forgive faster. You no longer chase moments, you live inside them. And when darkness comes, because it still does, you no longer fight it. You sit with it, breathe with it, and remember that light is not something you find, it's something you become. The revelation isn't loud. It's not a victory cry. It's a gentle knowing that nothing was ever missing, nothing was ever wrong, and that even in your deepest doubt, you were already